The first thing I heard was the clock. It ticked too loud for a cheap plastic clock, louder than the monitors, louder than the paramedic counting compressions. It sat over the trauma bay doors, crooked on the wall, one edge of its white frame smeared gray with old fingerprints. 32, 33, 34. Gloves squeaked against bare skin. The man on the gurney did not move. His chest rose and fell only because someone was pushing it. Collins, you are up. I snapped into the circle of light above the bed, took the paramedic's place, and set my hands on a stranger's sternum. Warm, slick, already tacky with dried blood. I locked my elbows and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. St. Jude Trauma Center at night was never quiet, but that bay felt like the only bright place in the whole building. Everything outside the curtains was noise and shadows. Police radio, families crying, a kid retching into a bucket 3 rooms down. This space was narrow and cruel, washed in white light and the smell of antiseptic and iron. Male, mid-30s, the paramedic rattled off. Multiple GSW to chest and abdomen, no pulse at scene, 4 minutes of CPR in the ambulance, intubated in the field. Any ID, Dr. Patel asked, without looking up from the monitor. Wallet was gone. Cops think he is the shooter from the Midtown Mall incident. That slid around the room like oil. One of the residents grunted. Someone muttered something under his breath that sounded like figures. It did not change what my hands were doing. 30 compressions, pause, ventilate. Sweat rolled down my back inside the gown. The stranger's skin was cool, not cold yet. Sticky with dried blood around the bullet holes. Someone pressed gauze to a wound that bubbled with each squeeze of the bag. On the monitor, his line was flat, a tiny, stubborn flat line. How long total? Dr. Patel asked. 18 minutes, the paramedic said. He stepped back, shoulders slumping, face gray. All right, Patel said. No response to epi, no organized rhythm. We will go 2 more and then call it. My arms already burned. I shifted my weight and felt something crunch under my palms. Maybe a rib, maybe 2. I did not apologize. Broken ribs do not matter if the heart does not come back. The overhead light hummed. The clock ticked. Somewhere behind me, a radio crackled tinny and urgent. 19 minutes, someone said. Time of death will be 21:38, Patel began. His voice went into that flat register doctors use when they are folding something awful into paperwork. I should have been ready to step back. We lose people, we say the words. We move on to the next room, the next wound. That is the job. Instead, my hands kept moving. Collins, Patel said, you can stop. I did not. The stranger's face was half covered by the mask, but I caught glimpses. Stubble dried blood at the corner of his mouth, a faint line in the middle of his forehead like he frowned a lot. His hair was dark and matted. There was nothing familiar there, but something tugged at the base of my skull, a memory I did not want and could not shake. 1 more round, I said. My voice was hoarse. Just 1. Patel frowned. We are past protocol. 1 more, I repeated. He hesitated for half a breath, then nodded once. Fine, epi repeat. The nurse pushed the medication. I pushed on the chest. My palm slipped and I adjusted. I needed a better angle. Needed to get lower, closer. Hang another unit, someone said. Pressure is undetectable, another voice replied. I shifted his upper body a few inches to my left to give room for a central line. That was when the hospital gown bunched up and the tape over his shoulder pulled away just enough for me to see it. Ink. Black and gray smeared with blood but intact. A moth wing spread wide. The edges of its wings looked burned, singed, and torn. Right in the middle of its body, a single match was drawn head aflame. Around it, a thin ring broken at the top with small Latin letters I knew by heart. My hands faltered. Just for a second. The room shrank. The noise drained out. All that was left was the ink on his skin and another shoulder in another light years ago. Noah on the back porch in August heat shirt, off beer in hand. Cicadas screaming in the trees. He turned his back to me, son, laying a stripe across his shoulders, and said, check this out. The same moth, the same burned wings, the same crooked ring. I remembered laughing at him. What is that supposed to be? He tapped the tiny letters with 1 finger. It means we walk in after the sun goes down. It is a unit thing. Nightfall directive. That is not a real thing, I hope. No que cuar, y moment I had said. He had grinned without humor. That is the point. We do not exist on paper. He made me trace the lines with my eyes, made me repeat the phrase until I could have drawn it from memory. Then he said softer, if you ever see this on someone else, you will know. They are not the enemy. They are family, no matter what anyone says. Now the same ink stared up at me from a stranger's skin under white light under my bloody hands. No, I whispered. Collins, Patel snapped. Focus. I blinked. The room crashed back around me. Beeps, voices, The faint hiss of oxygen. My arms moved again, automatic. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the monitor, the flat line twitched. Hold compressions, Patel said. I froze with my palm still on the man's sternum. The line jumped once, fell flat, jumped again. A heartbeat. Weak, irregular, but a heartbeat. Sinus Brady, the resident said, disbelieving. I will take it, Patel replied. All right, we are not dead. Get him to CT, get blood, secure those lines. The team burst into motion again. I stepped back, breathing hard, feeling my own pulse hammer in my neck. Blood speckled my face shield. My gloves were slick. The paramedic who had brought him in stared at the monitor, then at me. I had nothing for 4 minutes in the truck, he said. Oh, he said quietly. He was gone. I looked at the tattoo. Someone had wiped away some of the blood. The moth's burned wings looked like they were still smoking. My brother Noah had that mark on his shoulder when he left for his last deployment. He was 24, too skinny, too serious. They told us he died 2 months later in an explosion in Kandahar. There was a flag and a folded letter and a closed casket that smelled only like varnish and flowers. We were not allowed to see his body. In the years since I had dreamed of that tattoo more than I dreamed of his face. Sometimes I saw it disappearing into smoke. Sometimes it floated on water. Sometimes it was on strangers who turned around and had no faces at all. I never expected to see it in real life again. The doors to the trauma bay slid open with a hiss. 2 uniformed officers stood there, hands resting on their belts, faces tight. Is that him? One asked. His gaze swept across the bed. The shooter from Midtown. Nobody answered him directly. We had work to do. We said things like, move him on 3, and watch the line, and switch this out. The officer stepped aside as we pushed the gurney past them toward the elevators. As we rolled by, I glanced at the clock over the doors. 21:39. 1 minute past the time Patel had been ready to carve into a chart forever. Time of death? My hand still ached from fighting that sentence back into my throat. In the reflection on the elevator doors, I saw my own face between the officers, pale above a blue mask, eyes wide. I did not look like the person who followed protocols and let go when it was time. I looked like someone else, someone I did not quite recognize. The doors slid shut on the trauma bay, the officers, the crooked clock. Upstairs, the ICU waited, so did the questions. I kept seeing the ink on his shoulder every time I blinked, and with it my brother's back on that porch, the sun on his skin, the way he had said, we do not exist on paper like it was a joke and not a warning. I wrapped my fingers around the rail of the gurney and did not let go. The ICU swallows him. We push the bed out of the elevator and into a corridor that smells like bleach and plastic. The lights up here are softer, but they still have that hospital color that makes every face look washed out. Nurses glance up from computers, then down at their screens again. Another body, another monitor, more lines. Room 412 is ready. We wheel him in, transfer him to the ICU bed on a count of 3. The ventilator waits beside the wall like a patient animal. Someone hooks the tube from the field intubation to the machine, checks placement, listens for breath sounds. The monitor comes alive with numbers that are all too low. I stand at the foot of the bed, fingers resting on the metal rail as the ICU nurse takes over. She is calm, efficient. Dr. Patel gives a condensed handoff. Gunshot wounds, no pulse on arrival, prolonged CPR, brief return of spontaneous circulation. The officers stop in the doorway, their belts clinking softly. One of them peers around the curtain. Make sure he does not have any visitors, he says. He is intubated. The ICU nurse replies without looking up. Still, he says. His eyes flick to me, then away. This one is not just any patient. When I step out of the room, the hallway seems narrower. The officer who spoke falls into step beside me for a few paces. That him for sure, I ask. Security footage puts a guy his size, same clothes, leaving Midtown Mall with a gun. 2 civilians dead, 4 injured. He fits. He says it like a fact that cannot be argued with. I do not respond. I just nod as if my throat is too tired to work. At the nurses' station, one of the day shift nurses looks up at the TV mounted high in the corner. It is tuned to a local news channel. The banner at the bottom screams, Red Alert. Grainy footage plays on loop, a crowded mall, people running a shape in dark clothes near an escalator. That is tonight, right, she says in Midtown. Yeah, someone answers. He is upstairs now, room 412. The camera angle never gets close enough to see a face. The figure on the screen is just a blur of shadow against bright tile. Still, people talk about him like they already know who he is. Shooter, killer, animal. My mind supplies another word that does not belong with those. Family. The word sits in my chest like something swallowed wrong. By the time I make it back down to the emergency department, my legs feel hollow. The adrenaline is draining, leaving a buzzing fatigue under my skin. The trauma bay has been stripped and reset. New sheets, new instruments, no blood in sight, as if nothing happened. At the main desk, my name blinks on the board. I'm still on until dawn. I check in on a drunk teenager with a headlack, a grandmother with chest pain, a woman whose hands shake as she grips a basin. I answer questions. I move. I chart. My body knows the steps. My head is upstairs. On my meal break, I sit in front of a computer in the tiny staff lounge. The microwave hums in the corner. Someone's forgotten pasta cools on the table. My badge dangles from my pocket. I log into the electronic medical record. The patient's name sits in my list. Hayes Liam Trauma. I click it open. Age 36. No primary care provider listed. No insurance. Under past medical history, there is a blank line. No prior admissions. No medications. No allergies. No emergency contact. For a man his age, that is possible. People fall through the cracks all the time. They move. They forget to update records. They never see a doctor until they get shot. Still, something about the emptiness looks deliberate. I scroll down to the intake section. There is a line that reads, "Fingerprint scan, no match found." I stop. Everyone matches something. Military records, DMV, background checks, immigration, something. I have never seen that line before. Everything okay? I jump a little. Jonah, one of the residents, leans in the doorway with a styrofoam cup in his hand. Fine, I say. I click to another chart out of reflex, an old pneumonia admission. Just catching up on notes. He yawns. You look like you could use 20 hours of sleep. So do you. He lifts the cup in salute and wanders off again. When he is gone, I click back to Liam's chart. There is a small tab marked legal. I open it. Police hold yes. Notes. Contact Detective Unit Midtown Precinct. Federal interest. Hold personal belongings pending transfer. Federal interest. The words glow brighter than the rest of the text. I imagine someone typing them with a stiff jaw, then leaning back and rubbing their eyes. Behind me in the lounge, a cheap wall clock ticks steadily, just out of sync with the one in the trauma bay. I feel both rhythms in my skull. My break ends. The next few hours smear together, replacing IVs, drawing labs, updating families. The world shrinks to the corridor and the rooms in my list. Every time I pass the doorway that leads to the ICU elevators, I feel a tug at the side of my vision. Around 2 a.m, after we stabilize a car crash victim, I find myself at the nurse station again. The charge nurse is on the phone, with bed control. A tech wheels a cart of linens past us, humming under his breath. The doors from the ambulance bay hiss open and admit a different kind of presence. 2 men in dark suits walk in together, shoes too shiny for this floor. No badges on their belts, no identifying patches. Their ties are neat. Their hair is not. One of them carries a leather folder. The other scans the room, not stopping on anything for long. The charge nurse covers the receiver with her hand. "Can I help you?" "We are looking for Mr. Hayes," the man with the folder says. His voice is polite, practiced. She frowns. "Who are you with?" He smiles without warmth. "We are here on behalf of a federal task force. Our paperwork is with your administration." The other man lets his gaze move across the unit. When it passes over me, he gives a tiny nod, almost friendly. "Long night," he says. "They usually are," I answer. He looks like he has never had to hold pressure on a bleeding artery in his life. They disappear down the hall toward the elevators with the charge nurse. The doors slide shut. The unit returns to its familiar noise, but it feels less like a hospital now and more like a set. By the end of my shift, my body is done. My brain is not. I clock out at 6, peel off my badge, and step into the cold of the parking garage. Dawn turns the edges of the concrete pink. The city still smells like wet asphalt and exhaust. I should drive home, shower collapse. Instead, I sit in my car, with my hands on the steering wheel and my heart thudding, and I picture a metal cabinet in the bowels of this building. A cabinet with a sticker bearing Liam Hayes' medical record number. Inside that cabinet are his clothes, his shoes, whatever he had in his pockets when they cut them away, whatever he carried when someone tried to erase him in a different way. The suits told the charge nurse not to let anyone touch his belongings. They do not own me, not yet. I lock my car again and head back inside. The emergency department at change of shift is busy and unfocused. Night shift is trying to give report. Day shift is trying to get coffee. I blend with the movement, duck through a side door, and take the service stairs down. The basement is a different world. The air is cooler and tastes like dust and metal. Pipes run along the ceiling. The lights hum and flicker, not quite strong enough to chase away the shadows. Signs on the cinder block walls direct to Laundry Supply Biomed. At the end of the corridor, there is a heavy door with a keypad and a badge reader. A small printed sign reads Patient Property. I swipe my badge. For a second, the red light holds. Then it turns green. The lock clicks. Inside rows of metal cabinets line the walls. Each has a printed label with a number. Plastic bins sit on shelves. There is a faint smell of detergent mixed with something older. I check my phone. I had memorized the last digits of his medical record number from the chart. I scan the labels until I find the match. My fingers feel clumsy on the small padlock. The combination goes in on the second try. The lock pops open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside the cabinet is a clear plastic bag with a black duffel folded inside it, and a second smaller bag with shoes. I slide the larger one out, lay it on a metal table, and peel back the plastic. The duffel smells like blood and gunpowder and sweat, even through the faint scent of disinfectant. Inside are dark tactical pants, stiff with dried brown stains, a t-shirt sliced open from collar to hem a belt. No wallet, no keys, no documents. At the bottom of the bag is a hard rectangular shape. I pull out a phone in a thick waterproof case. The screen is black. When I press the side button, a lock screen flickers up. No notifications, just a keypad with a long row of dots for a code that is not a birthday. Under the phone is a slim plastic folder with a cloudy cover. Someone has sealed it with tape. I pause listening. Nothing but the low hum of the air system. Somewhere deeper in the basement, a cart squeaks over tile. I peel the tape and open the folder. Papers inside printed on thin stock that sticks together. The first few sheets are covered in Cyrillic characters. Names I cannot pronounce. The next pages have Arabic script blocky and elegant. There are maps with red circles and numbers written along the margins. Coordinates typed in a little grid at the bottom. Tucked between the papers is a stack of glossy photographs, the old kind with white borders and dates stamped in red ink on the back. My hand tightens a little around them. I flip the first one over. A group of men in dusty uniforms stand in front of a concrete wall. Sunlight blows everything out a little. Faces are in shadow. I do not recognize them. Next photo, a helicopter on a landing pad, rotors blurred, someone crouched beside a crate. Next. The fourth photo freezes the air in my lungs. 5 men stand shoulder to shoulder in sand-colored gear sleeves, rolled rifles slung on straps. Their faces are younger than the one I saw upstairs, but not by much. The man in the center has his arm slung around another's neck, dragging him a little closer, as if he did not want him to ghost out of the frame. The one doing the dragging is Noah. His hair is shorter than the last time I saw him on our porch. His jaw sharper, but his smile is the same sideways things that never fully reached his eyes. His sleeves are pushed up. On his right shoulder, ink peeks out the top of a burnt wing and the edge of a circle. The man next to him caught mid-laugh is Liam. No blood on his face here, no tubes. Just a guy in a sun-faded uniform alive. I flip the photo over. Red numbers mark the date AUGU 14-2013. Someone has scribbled in pen under it. Kandahar. Noah's official date of death is March 2011. The basement tilts around me just a little. I grip the edge of the table to keep my balance. The clock on the wall above the cabinets has stopped, both hands stuck on 12. For 2 years after the military told my family my brother died, in an explosion, he was still breathing somewhere under that hot sky, standing next to the man I almost watched die tonight. The flag, the folded letter, the closed casket that smelled like nothing, all of it slides in my memory like a picture frame knocked crooked. I raise my phone with hands that do not feel entirely connected to me and take photos of every page, every map, every photograph. The shutter sound seems too loud in the small room. When I am done, I stack everything exactly how I found it. Papers, photos, folder, phone, clothes, duffel. I seal the plastic again and return it to the cabinet. The lock snaps shut. The metal is cool under my fingers. On the way out, I glance once at the clock. It is still stopped. Upstairs, people are starting their day. Coffee, new orders, fresh scrubs. For them, time moves in a straight line. Mine has just folded back on itself. I did not remember the drive home. 1 second I was in the basement, the smell of dust and metal in my nose. Noah frozen on glossy paper under a sky that was not supposed to exist for him. The next, I was in my shower, hot water needling my shoulders, hospital soap in my eyes. I slept for 3 hours and woke up with my heart already racing, lungs tight, like I had been running in my dreams. The image of that photo stayed in front of everything. 5 men, 1 sky, 1 lie. My phone buzzed around noon. A group text from work, someone trading shifts, a meme about night shift. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection in the black glass looked older than yesterday. On autopilot, I opened my photo gallery. Maps, documents, Liam laughing in the sun beside Noah, the date stamp, Kandahar. No one had forced me to take those pictures. No one had ordered me to look. I went back to bed. I lasted 10 minutes staring at the ceiling, counting the tiny cracks in the paint. I could still hear the ICU ventilators I had left behind. The sound looped in my head. There was a note buried in Liam's chart that I had barely processed before. Federal interest, hold personal belongings pending transfer. Transfer to where? By 3 p.m, I was fully awake and sitting at my kitchen table with my car keys in my hand. My shift was not until 10 that night. I could stay here, drink coffee, pretend this was not gnawing through my chest. I picked up my badge instead. St. Jude in daylight felt like a different building. Less echo, more people in regular clothes, volunteers with carts of magazines, a family in matching t-shirts clustered by a vending machine. I took the staff entrance, nodded at security, and rode the elevator up to the ICU. Scrubs on hair pulled back, badge visible. Nobody questioned me. I belonged here. That was the thing that made all of this possible. The ICU nurses were doing afternoon med rounds. I checked the assignment board. Room 412 had a name scrawled next to it in dry erase marker. Hayes. Beside that, in smaller letters, someone had written, Fed Hold. His door was half closed. Through the glass, I could see him. He lay propped at a slight angle, chest wrapped in bandages, tubes still in his throat machines around the bed. The ventilator hissed rhythmically. His hands were restrained loosely at the wrists. His skin had more color now, not much. Enough to make it harder to imagine him as a body in a basement cabinet. The nurse assigned to him, Lena, stood at the computer outside the room checking orders. How is he doing? I asked. She shrugged. Better than he should. Pressure is holding. No new bleeding. Sedated, but every time I lighten him, he fights the tube. Any word on his transfer? She nodded toward a folded stack of papers on the counter. Some guys in suits brought those about an hour ago. Once he is stable enough for transport, he is gone. That is above my pay grade. I looked at the stack. Federal letterhead, seals, blocks of text, a place for signatures. Do you need a break? I asked. I can sit with him for a bit. Lena glanced at the clock. It was almost shift change. Her shoulders slumped slightly. You are not on until later, right? I was early. I could use the hours. She hesitated, then smiled with something like relief. If you want to babysit him for 30 minutes so I can grab food, I will not fight you. I got him, I said. Inside the room, the air felt cooler. The blinds were half closed against the afternoon light. The monitor beside his bed showed a heart rate in the 80s, a blood pressure low but acceptable. The ventilator pushed air in and let it out with a soft sigh. I stepped closer and looked at his face without the chaos around it. He had a faint scar along his jaw, years old. Stubble on his cheeks was just coming in. There was a bruise on his temple that had not been there last night, probably from the fall when he went down. Dried blood still clung to the edges of his hairline. The bandage on his right shoulder had shifted a little at the edge. A dark curve of ink was visible, the tip of a burned wing. I checked the sedation pump. The medication scrolled across the tiny screen, a green line running at a steady rate. I had done enough post-op shifts to know the range, enough trauma nights to know what different doses did to different bodies, enough ICU floats to recognize the point between safe and excessive. I could walk away. Wait for the suits to come, watch them take him to whatever facility had no name in our system. I put my hand on the pump instead. The machine beeped softly as I entered a lower rate. Not off, not dangerously low, just enough to loosen the grip to let his brain swim closer to the surface. I watched him for a full 10 minutes as the new dose settled. His vitals stayed steady, then his eyelashes twitched. His fingers flexed against the restraints. His heart rate climbed a little, 85, 90. I stepped to the side of the bed so that when he opened his eyes, he would see me first. Liam, I said quietly, if you can hear me, open your eyes. His forehead wrinkled. His eyelids fluttered, dragged up by invisible weights. For a moment, they opened only a slit, then wider. The look he gave me was unfocused at first, pupils struggling to adapt to the light. Then it sharpened. There was panic in it, and confusion and pain. He made a muffled sound around the tube. Do not fight it, I said. You are intubated, you are in a hospital, you were shot, you are alive. Alive, the word felt strange here. He tried to lift his hand. The restraint tugged him back. He stared at the strap, then at me again. I need you to listen, I said. My voice wanted to shake, but I kept it flat. You have a tattoo on your right shoulder, a moth with burned wings and a match. Latin around it. I know that symbol. His gaze sharpened again, cutting through the haze. My brother had the same one, I said, on the same shoulder. For a second he did not react. Then his entire body went rigid. The heart monitor jumped. The ventilator alarm chirped as he tried to pull in a breath against the machine. Hey, I said quickly, stop. You will trigger every alarm in this place. It was too late. The heart rate climbed into the hundreds. The ventilator beeped loud, now flashing red. Lena appeared at the door. What happened? She asked, already reaching for the pump. He is agitated, I said. It was not a lie. It was not the whole truth either. She checked his restraints, then the sedation line. He's not ready to be awake. She increased the dose, fingers moving fast. I will call respiratory to check the tube. He stared at me as the medication started to pull him back under. His eyes were wide, not with fear of dying. Something else. Recognition. Maybe regret. As his lids grew heavy, he mouthed something around the plastic. It was not a word I could hear, but I saw the shape. Noah. By the time respiratory therapy arrived, he was still again. The alarms quieted. His heart rate drifted back down. Lena gave me a look that hovered between suspicion and gratitude. Next time, talk to me before you go in with him, she said. Yeah, I answered. Sorry. I left the room, but the imprint of his eyes followed me out. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to do normal things, helping with admissions, hanging antibiotics, answering families. My hands did their jobs. My head replayed that moment when his gaze had snapped into focus at the word tattoo. When my shift officially started at 10, the day outside had already sunk into night. The ICU lights seemed harsher. The suits were back, their folders thicker now, their presence heavier. I overheard them at the nurse station, their voices low but not low enough. Transport window is set for morning, one said. He goes out before noon, no detours, no stops. And the documentation, the other asked. In progress. They spoke like men moving inventory. In room 412, Liam slept under the weight of sedatives and bandages. On my phone in my pocket, my brother smiled at me from a country he had supposedly died in. Somewhere between those two realities, the truth about Nightfall Directive waited. My alarm is set for 8. I wake up at 6. The room is gray, the kind of light that makes it hard to tell if the sun is rising or if the sky just gave up. My sheets are tangled around my legs. My tongue feels like paper. For a second, I do not know what pulled me out of sleep. Then I remember the clock in the basement frozen at 12 and Noah's face in the photograph and the way Liam's lips had shaped my brother's name. Any chance of more sleep dissolves. I sit up, grab my phone from the nightstand, and scroll through the notifications. 2 missed calls from unknown numbers, a voicemail from a hospital line, a text from Lena. Your guy in 412 pulled his own tube out around 4, it reads. Breathing on his own. Docs are freaking out in a good way. Suits are back. Thought you would want to know. My stomach twists. I stare at the screen until the words blur, then swing my legs out of bed. By 7:30, I'm in the hospital parking garage, hair still damp from the shower scrubs clinging to my skin, where they have not quite dried. I should not be here for another 2.5 hours. I do not care. Nobody stops someone in scrubs who walks like they know where they are going. The ICU is awake in that quiet way. It has monitors beeping soft shoe squeaks, murmured voices. The air smells like coffee and saline. Room 412's door is open. The ventilator has been rolled back against the wall. The bed is raised a little. Liam is propped up against the pillows, a nasal cannula under his nose tape residue around his mouth. His hair is damp at the temples, either from sweat or from someone wiping his face. The breathing tube is gone. His chest rises and falls on its own. 2 agents in suits stand just outside the doorway talking to Dr. Patel in the ICU attending. Paperwork sits on a clipboard held between them. Words drift over to me in fragments. Pulled out the tube himself. Too fast a recovery. Transport team is lined up. Need signatures. The nearer agent sees me and gives that same small nod I saw last night. You again, he says. You work all the time or what? Feels like it, I answer. He smiles as if we are sharing a joke. Inside the room, Lena is checking Liam's IV lines. His eyes are open. They follow her movements, then flick toward the doorway. I hold up my badge to the agent. I'm covering for Lena for a minute, I say. She probably needs a bathroom break. Lena overhears and gives a short laugh. She's not wrong. The attending glances at the agents, then nods at me. Fine. He is stable for the moment. We are signing off on the transfer. Do not change anything on his meds. Of course, I say. They move a few steps down the hall with their papers. Lena slips past me, squeezing my arm in passing. He is tough, she whispers. Watch his pain level. Then she is gone. I step into the room and pull the door mostly closed behind me. Not enough to block the window, just enough to muffle sound. Up close, Liam looks more human than he did with a tube in his throat. His lips are cracked. There is a faint rasp in his breathing, but it is steady. The bandages on his chest rise and fall. His gaze locks onto mine as soon as I'm within arm's reach. There is no fog now. Whatever they gave him, it is riding the edge of consciousness rather than burying him. You are Laura Collins, he says. His voice is rough, but the words are clear. For a second, I forget how to breathe. How do you know my name? I ask. He swallows. The movement tugs at the bruises along his neck. You look like him, Noah, except your eyes are worse. Worse how? More tired. I pull the chair closer to the bed and sit down. My knees feel unsteady. He talked about you, Liam says, more than he talked about anyone. Nobody has told me that since the officers came to our door with their folded flag and careful voices. He is supposed to be dead, Uyo says. I say, the words are flat. He has been dead for 12 years. Liam coughs a laugh that turns into a wince. Not when that picture was taken. I saw it. I say when Kandahar, 5 of you, date stamped, 2 years after his death certificate. His eyes close briefly. When he opens them again, there is something like resignation in them. I figured they would keep it somewhere safe, he says. Government likes its souvenirs. Who are you exactly, I ask. And what is Nightfall Directive? He watches me quietly for a moment as if weighing something. You sure you want that story, he asks. I have his tattoo burned into my brain, I say. I walked in his funeral behind an empty box. There is not much you can say that will make this mess worse. He looks at the ceiling and inhales slowly. The effort shows across his chest. We were a unit the Army did not admit to having, he says. Not officially. They gave us a name. Nightfall Directive. Sounded cool on paper we were never supposed to see. His gaze shifts back to me. They picked us from different teams, he says. Guys and women who could follow orders, keep mouths shut, live in gray areas. Our job was to walk into things that could not go wrong in public. The kind of missions that if they went sideways would not show up in any hearings. Like what happened to Noah, I say. He nods once. Afghanistan, 2011. They sent us to pull a politician out of a village near Kandahar. He was doing business with people everyone wanted to pretend we never met. If we got him out, great. If we did not, nobody was ever going to admit we tried. He pauses to catch his breath. I glance at the monitor. His heart rate is up a little, but holding. The intel was wrong, he says, or it was bait. Either way, the village was a kill box. I lost count of how many shooters there were. Half our team went down in the first minute. The rest of us got pinned. I picture it without wanting to. Dust, gunfire, the same sun from the photograph, too bright and uncaring. They wrote it up for your family as an IED, he says. Big explosion, no bodies, easier that way. I remember the officer's mouth tightening when my mother asked if they were sure. I remember the way he did not quite look at her. Who survived, I ask. 5 of us, he says. Me, Noah, Torres, Jensen, Kate Monroe. We limped our way to an extraction point that was never on any map. When we got back to base, they locked us in a room with no windows for 24 hours. His eyes have gone distant as if he can see that room again. Then a colonel I had never met came in and put a folder on the table, he says. Told us the mission had been erased. Official story was that we all died heroes. Our names were going on a wall. Our families were getting flags and letters. And you, I ask. They gave us a choice, he says. He says. Disappear with new names, new lives, no contact with anyone we used to know, or refuse and have accidents. Gun cleaning gone wrong. Single car wreck on an empty road, that kind of thing. That is not a choice, I whisper. He lifts one shoulder slightly. The movement pulls at his bandages. Most of us picked the same thing, Faggy says. We signed papers we were not allowed to read. They put us on planes to different places, told us to stay quiet forever. In exchange for staying alive, I say. In exchange for them not killing us themselves, he replies. The monitor beeps a little faster. Outside in the hall, a cart rattles by. Voices murmur. The agents' silhouettes move in the frosted glass. What happened to the others, I ask. Torres, Jensen, Kate. His jaw tightens. Torres tried to go to a reporter last year, A says. Car rolled 3 times on a straight highway in broad daylight. No other vehicles involved. The story never made it past a 2-line blurb. My mouth goes dry. Jensen turned up with a bullet in his head and a note in his pocket that said he was tired. Liam continues. He was left-handed. Shot was on the right side. And Kate, I ask? She stopped answering a secure line we had, he then said. Nuash. Ed, he says. Her cabin burned. They said it was a faulty heater. There was no body they could identify. He looks at me, then really looks as if making sure I am holding on to each word. I figured I was next, he says. I started moving, changed towns every few months, watched my 6. It did not matter. They found me outside Midtown yesterday. The 2 men I dropped in that mall were not civilians. They were private contractors I knew from the old days. Cleanup crew, I say. That is one way to put it, he says. My hands are fists in my lap without me noticing. And Noah, I ask. The question has been building in my throat since I walked in. Liam exhales slowly. For the first time, his expression softens. Last I knew he was in Montana, he says. Small town, mountains. Name of the place is Cedar Ridge. He was going by Ethan Chase, building cabins, keeping his head down. Is he alive? The words scrape out of me. I thought so, Liam says. I called an emergency number he gave me about 2 weeks ago. No answer, no call back. That is not like him. He swallows again. If they cleaned up Torres and Jensen and went after me in a crowded mall, they are not going to leave him alone, he says. He always knew too much. He always asked too many questions. That sounds like my brother. My heart is beating so hard it feels like it might shake the bed. Outside, the agents' voices get closer. I do not know if he is dead or alive, Liam says quietly. I know that if his file says he died 12 years ago somewhere, he stopped existing for them twice. They do not like loose ends. He shifts his gaze to the door where their shadows move. You should not be here, Hio says. You have already stuck your neck out too far. They will not care you saved my life. They will care that you saw things you were not supposed to see. I saw my brother in that folder, I say. And now you have to decide what you do with that, he replies. The door opens before I can answer. The agent with the leather folder steps in, his smile already in place. Mr. Hayes, he says, looks like you are in good enough shape for a little trip. He glances at me. Nurse, we will need a quick set of vitals before transport. Liam does not take his eyes off mine. Your brother loved you, he says. His voice is softer now, meant for me alone. He talked about you like you were the only thing that made sense in that whole mess. Whatever he did after they buried him on paper, it was to keep you out of this. My throat closes. I nod once because I cannot trust my voice. The agents unclip the restraints, transfer him to a transport stretcher with practiced efficiency. He grimaces once when the movement jars his wounds, but he does not make a sound. As they wheel him out past me, he turns his head a fraction. Cedar Ridge, he says, Ethan Chase. Then he is gone, swallowed by the hallway, the doors, the signatures waiting at the nurse station. I stand in the empty room for a long moment listening to the quiet. The impression of his words presses against my ribs from the inside. On the wall, the clock ticks steadily forward. I floated through the rest of that shift like someone wearing my body. I charted. I checked vitals. I reassured families. Somewhere above my head, an elevator carried Liam to an unmarked van and a destination that did not exist in our system. When I finally stepped out into the parking garage, the sun was already high, bleaching the concrete and making my eyes ache. Home did not feel like home. It felt like a holding pen. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, then caught myself staring at the empty hook where my brother's old watch used to hang. I had moved it to a drawer years ago, tired of seeing something that no longer ticked. Now I opened the drawer and took it out. The glass was scratched. The hands were frozen at a time that had once meant nothing. I turned it over in my palm, then set it in the middle of the kitchen table. Next to it, I put my phone and opened the photo of Noah in Kandahar. He squinted against bright desert light. His arm pulled Liam into the frame. The date stamp glared at me from the corner. 2 years after he died, for the record. My shift the next night blinked on the schedule in my mind. My mortgage payment sat in a pile of bills by the toaster. My license hung in my wallet. All the small anchors of the life I had built around the empty space Noah left. I could keep all of it. Keep my badge. Keep my routines. Close the drawer on the watch and delete the photos. Let the government be what it was. Let Noah be whatever they had decided he was. My chest felt tight at the thought, like the room had lost air. I opened my laptop. The screen lit my face in cold blue. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed Montana and Cedar Ridge and Ethan Chase, then erased it all before I hit enter. Every search left a trail. Liam had said they monitored flights, rentals, anything that might link. I did not know who they were exactly. Only that they had erased my brother once and were trying to erase him again. I closed the laptop and pushed it away. Instead, I pulled a pad of paper toward me. The pen felt clumsy in my hand after so much typing, but the ink was private at least. Names and numbers blurred into a few simple lines. Notice to supervisor requesting personal leave. 2 weeks. No details. No forwarding address. I wrote it out neatly, then crumpled it, then wrote it again. The second time, my hand shook less. By midday, I was in my manager's office, the form in my lap. She frowned at the dates. Everything all right? She asked. Family stuff, I said. It was the truth with most of the words removed. I need some time. Is this about your brother? She asked quietly. She had been there long enough to remember the funeral notice tacked on the bulletin board 12 years ago. In a way, I said. She studied my face, then nodded. We will manage. You have the hours. Just keep your phone on. I smiled without really meaning it. I will try. From there, the rest slid more easily than it should have. I stopped at the bank. I pulled out more cash than I was comfortable carrying. I paid my next bills early enough to keep the lights on in an empty apartment. In my bedroom, I packed a small suitcase, jeans, sweaters, a jacket that could handle cold I was not used to, sturdy shoes. I did not know how long I would be gone. That was a thought my mind refused to hold for more than a second at a time. When everything was zipped and standing by the door, I picked up my brother's watch and slid it into the front pocket of my bag. The airport felt like stepping into a web. Cameras, checkpoints, names on screens. I stood in the line with my ticket in my hand and felt exposed in a way trauma bays never made me feel. I had booked the flight on my own card. There was no other way. If someone somewhere ran my information against Liam's case file, they would find this trip. I booked a one-way ticket to Spokane. It was the closest major airport with a fare I could afford. From there, I would rent a car and drive across the state line into Montana. The idea of that road, long and empty, both calmed me and made my palms sweat. On the plane, the woman next to me made small talk about the weather and how she hated turbulence. I answered with noises that sounded like words. My mind was on a cabin that might or might not still be standing in a town I had never seen. When we landed, the air that hit my face outside the terminal felt different. Thinner, cleaner, colder. Trees rose up beyond the parking lots, dark green against a sky so wide it made my chest loosen a little. I rented the smallest car they had. The clerk slid the keys across the counter and warned me about ice on the back roads. I nodded, signed, and drove. The highway unspooled in front of me. Mountains lifted on the horizon, just outlines at first, then shapes with depth. The farther I got from the city, the fewer cars I saw. Pines lined the road. Patches of old snow clung to their shadows. At the state line, a weathered sign welcomed me to Montana. I slowed just enough to read it, then kept going. Cedar Ridge appeared on my right 2 hours later, announced by a green metal sign and a gas station with 2 pumps and a small grocery attached. A cluster of low buildings huddled closer to the mountains, smoke rising in thin lines from chimneys. The town was small enough that if you blinked, you might miss its middle. There was one main street with angled parking, a diner with a hand-painted sign, a hardware store, a place that sold wood stoves and pellets. A motel with a flickering vacancy sign leaned under the weight of old snow on its roof. I pulled into the motel lot. Inside the office, a woman in her 50s looked up from a magazine. "Needing a room?" she asked. "Just for a few nights," I said, paying cash. Her eyebrows twitched, but she slid the registration card toward me. "Name?" she asked. "Lauren," I said. It was close enough to the truth that I would answer to it without thinking. "Lauren Cole." She handed me a key with a plastic fob and pointed. "Second floor, third from the end. Heat works if you jiggle the thermostat." The room smelled like old carpet cleaner and dry air. The bedspread was a faded floral. The window looked out toward the edge of town, where the buildings thinned and the trees took over. I sat on the bed for a minute and listened to the silence. No sirens, no intercoms, no monitors. Just the distant sound of a truck on the highway and the wind finding its way around corners. My stomach reminded me I had not eaten since the plane. The diner called to me more for information than for food. Inside it was warm and bright. A bell over the door announced me. A few locals occupied booths, their conversations low and familiar, the smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around me. I took a seat at the counter. The waitress, a woman about my age with her hair twisted into a knot, poured me coffee without asking. "Passing through," she said. "Something like that," I answered. "Looking for someone, actually." Her eyes narrowed just enough to show she was listening. "He is supposed to live around here," I said. "Goes by Ethan Chase, builds cabins, custom work." She wiped a ring of moisture off the counter with her towel, thinking. "Ethan," she said slowly. "Tall, quiet talks like he is not from here." "That sounds right," I said. My heartbeat had found a new pace. Buys lumber from Jackson over at the yard," she added. "He built a deck on my sister's place last summer. Lives out by Hollow Creek, far side of town." She reached for a napkin and a pen, then sketched a quick map. Highway. A turn by the old mill. A gravel road that wound up into the trees. "His cabin is the one with the gray truck out front," she said. "He keeps to himself. You family." The word hit me quiet and hard. "Yeah," I said. "Something like that." She studied my face for a second longer, then nodded. "Tell him Louise says his coffee is still terrible." I folded the napkin into my pocket and left a tip larger than the meal deserved. Back in the car, I followed the napkin map. The town fell away behind me. The road narrowed, then shifted from pavement to gravel, then to dirt. Trees closed in on both sides, tall and dark, their branches whispering together overhead. Hollow Creek murmured along the right side of the road, water moving over rocks. The air here felt even cleaner, sharp in my lungs. My tires crunched to a stop where the path widened enough for a vehicle to pull off. Ahead through the trees, a small clearing opened around a cabin. It was simple. Wood walls weathered to a soft gray. A metal chimney pipe curled a faint thread of smoke into the sky. A stack of split logs sat under an overhang. A truck, as promised, rested in the dirt drive, paint-dulled tires muddy. For a long moment I stayed in the car, fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, watching. If I got out and walked up to that door, I could be wrong. The man who answered could be a stranger with my brother's name on some buried list. Or the agents could have found him first. If I stayed here, I could tell myself any story I wanted. The watch in my bag pressed cool against my leg. I opened the door and stepped out. The ground was soft under my shoes, a mix of old needles and packed earth. The air smelled like pine sap and wood smoke. Birds chattered high above. Up close, the cabin's details came into focus. Tool marks on the beams. A row of nails hammered into the post by the door for hanging coats. A pair of worn boots sitting neatly side by side on the porch. I climbed the 2 steps to the door and lifted my hand. It hovered there, muscles locked for 3 heartbeats. Then I knocked. The sound was small in the clearing, but loud in my chest. I heard movement inside. A chair sliding against wood. A soft thump of footsteps. The door opened halfway. The man who looked back at me was older than the one in the photograph, and older than the one on our porch in Illinois. His beard was trimmed but rough. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. His shoulders were broader, his posture more guarded. His eyes were the same. For one suspended moment, neither of us spoke. His mouth opened a little, then closed. His gaze ran over my face as if comparing it to a picture only he could see. "Maya," he said. It came out as barely more than a breath. My throat closed. All the words I had rehearsed on the drive up scattered. I nodded once. He reached out his hand, shaking, and pulled me inside. The door shut behind me with a soft click. The cabin smelled like wood shavings and coffee that had been left on the burner too long. Light came in through 2 small windows, pale and clean, laying rectangles across the floor. There was a table with sawdust on it, a battered couch shelves lined with jars and tools. No television, no pictures on the walls. He kept one hand on the door for a second, as if he needed it to steady himself. Up close, I could see the silver in his beard, the deeper lines at the corners of his mouth. His eyes, though, were the same deep brown I had seen in every childhood memory. "I thought I was losing it," he said. "I heard your knock and I thought it was in my head." I tried to answer. Nothing came out. He stepped closer. His hand lifted like he was afraid I might disappear if he moved too fast. When his fingers brushed my shoulder, something inside my chest finally broke loose. I made a sound I did not recognize as mine. Then we were both moving at once, arms wrapping tight. His chest was solid and warm under the worn cotton of his shirt. I felt the rise and fall of his breathing, the way it hitched when he exhaled. "I am here," he said into my hair. "Maya, I am here." I pulled back just far enough to see his face again. "You are supposed to be dead," I said. It sounded blunt, like an accusation, but it was the only sentence that made sense. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I have been hearing that for years." He let go of me with one arm and gestured toward the table. "Sit," he said. "You want coffee? It tastes like dirt, but it is hot." I sat. My legs were grateful for the excuse. The mug he set in front of me was chipped on one side. The coffee smelled burned but familiar. His hands shook when he poured his own just enough to make the liquid tremble. "How did you find me?" he asked. "I am a nurse," I said, "at St. Jude Trauma in Houston." He blinked. "Houston, that's a long way from Naperville." 12 years, he answered. "Not safe, no, yeah," I answered. The word hung between us, a measure of distance that was not just miles. I told him about the trauma bay, about the man on the gurney with no name and no pulse, about the tattoo on his shoulder. I watched Noah's face as I spoke, the way his jaw tightened when I said Liam's name. "Liam Hayes," I said. "That is what they put in the chart." He closed his eyes for a moment, his fingers wrapped around his mug until the knuckles went white. "I pulled his chart," I continued. "There was nothing. Then I went down to the property room. I described the duffel, the plastic folder, the papers in languages I could not read. Then the photographs, the 5th one. His arm around Liam's neck, both of them younger and alive, the date stamped in the corner. "They kept everything, Mamush said. "Of course they did." "They told us you died," I said. The heat in my chest surprised me. It was old, but it had never had a target before. "They sent a letter, a flag. They put your name on a plaque. There was a box with your rank on a plate. There was nothing inside it." He stared down into his cup. When he looked up again, his eyes were wet. "I wanted to call he said. "The night they handed me the new ID, I almost stole a phone. They had us in a hangar with no windows. There were 2 guys at the door carrying guns like they were part of their hands. The colonel told us if we reached out to anyone, we would be putting them in the ground with us." "You believed him," I said. He said. "They made a believer of Torres," he said. then Jensen, then Kate. He already knew. Torres is dead, I said. Car accident, Jensen too. They called his death a suicide. Kate is gone. He nodded once as if he had been expecting each word. I know, he said. It was just a matter of time after that. Liam thought he was next, I said. They found him near a mall. He killed 2 of them in the food court when they came for him. They called it a shooting. They called him a monster. They brought him to us in pieces. I told him about the ICU, about the federal paperwork, about Liam pulling his own tube and talking around the rawness in his throat, about Nightfall Directive, the kill box in Afghanistan, the choice in the windowless room. Most of it was confirmation for Noah. A few details he did not know widened his eyes. He gave me your name, I said. Ethan Chase, Cedar Ridge, cabin near a place called Hollow Creek. Noah looked toward the nearest window as if he could see past the trees. When he turned back, there was grief in his face that had nothing to do with his own choices. They will kill him, he said. His voice was flat. If they have not already. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of something on the counter. A small kitchen clock, its second hand stuttering forward. We sat with that for a while. You should not have come, Noah said finally. They watch passengers, flight manifests, cards. If they connect you to Liam at that hospital and then see you show up in this zip code, they will come north. It is possible, I said. It is certain, he said. I could not stay, I answered. He studied my face then the way he used to when we were kids, and I tried to lie about taking his jacket. Whatever he saw there made his shoulders drop. How is Mom, should I say? He asked. She must be retired by now, still burning casseroles. The question knocked something sideways in me. She is gone, I said. 6 years now. Heart attack, they said. He closed his eyes again. His hand came up, covered his mouth. His shoulders shook once. It was not a dramatic thing. It was quiet and small and more painful than anything I had seen in the trauma bay. She thought you were a hero, I said softly. She put your picture on the mantel. She talked to the empty box at holidays. She kept your watch in her nightstand. Noah lowered his hand. His face was wet. I am sorry, she said. I should have found a way. You were supposed to be dead, I repeated. I do not know what you could have done. The kettle on the stove chose that moment to rattle faintly. He stood, wiped his face on his sleeve, and refilled our mugs, as if that could fix anything. We talked until the light outside the windows turned from pale to gold to blue. We picked our way through 12 missing years, my nursing school, his odd jobs in places with names I did not know. Nights he slept in cars. Nights I sat awake in on call rooms thinking of a grave that did not exist. At some point, he pulled a drawer open and took out a watch I recognized. The same model as the one in my bag, same scratched face. Its hands were frozen at a different time than mine. They issued us all the same watch, he said, back when we were still official. It broke in that village. I kept it anyway. He set it on the table between us. 2 circles of glass, 2 different moments trapped forever. Time stopped twice, I said. He looked at me, then laughed under his breath, not because it was funny, but because it was true, and there was nowhere else for the sound to go. There were no plans made that night. No lists. Just the slow realization that neither of us was going back to the lives we had been pretending to live. 3 months later, the cabin feels different. There is another mug on the shelf, one I picked out from the thrift store in town. There is a stack of scrubs folded in a drawer, not because I go to a hospital, but because I could not make myself throw them away. My apartment back in Houston sits dark. My resignation email is buried in my old manager's inbox. I live 20 minutes from Cedar Ridge now, in a town even smaller with a post office that doubles as a grocery. I use a version of my name that does not match any badge I ever wore. I work mornings at a cafe that looks out over a lake, the kind of place that sells more pie than coffee. In the afternoons, when the sky is clear and the roads are not slick, a man with a beard and tired eyes sometimes comes in and takes the corner table by the window. He orders whatever is on special and complains that the coffee is too weak. I wipe down the counter and listen to him argue with the barista about the proper ratio of grounds to water. His voice is lower than it used to be, but the cadence is the same. Today, when I finish my shift, I hang my apron on its hook and cross the room to sit with him. The clock on the wall above the pastry case ticks just a little slower than it should. No one has bothered to fix it. Outside, the mountains are bright with late snow. The lake holds the sky in its surface. Noah wraps his hands around his cup and looks at me over the rim. How was it? He asks. He means the morning rush, the tourists, the couple who ordered 4 different kinds of pancakes. Loud? I say they sticky fine. He nods. The small talk is a bridge we cross one step at a time. Beneath it, there is always the roar of the river. We do not talk about Nightfall Directive. We do not talk about the names Torres or Jensen or Liam. We do not talk about the possibility of a car pausing too long on the road outside or a stranger asking the wrong questions. Those thoughts sit in the room anyway, quiet as extra chairs. Instead, we talk about the way the ice on the lake is finally thinning, about a broken hinge on his front door that keeps catching his sleeve, about a book a customer insisted I should read. Ordinary things that feel in their own way like a defiance. When the conversation pauses, I look up at the cafe clock. The second hand stutters, then jumps a tiny hesitation before it keeps moving. In my pocket, my brother's watch lies still, its hands fixed on a time that no one else remembers. Sometimes I press my thumb against the glass as if I could make it move again. It never does. Across from me, Noah is very much alive. His heartbeat is a quiet presence in the air between us. It is not something the hospital monitors will ever record. On paper, in a file cabinet in some building far away, he died in Afghanistan 12 years ago. In another file, I am probably still a nurse at St. Jude, scheduled for nights available for call. Here in this small room that smells like coffee and sugar and wet boots, none of that matters as much as the fact that when I say his name, he looks up. "Hey," I say. He raises his eyebrows. "Your coffee is still terrible," I tell him. He laughs a real sound this time, and the clock on the wall keeps its slow and perfect time while we sit there and let the minutes pass. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.